Hi, I'm Charles, and you're watching The State of the Republic. We begin this week overseas in Afghanistan, which has seen a string of large-scale terrorist attacks. These attacks are indicative of the fact that the U.S. and NATO-supported Afghan government's failure in the war on terror. Taliban forces are now estimated to control nearly half the country, their highest level of control since the war began 17 years ago. These reversals have led to the Trump administration refusing to release information to the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction. The Defense Department is now pushing for an increase in U.S. troops, ramping up U.S. involvement after the Obama-era effort to wind down our troop involvement. There is little reason to believe that a few thousand extra soldiers will make a big difference, when over 100,000 troops prove unable to secure the country. In other parts of the Middle East, the Turkish military is continuing an offensive against Kurdish forces backed by the U.S. in the Syrian city of Afrin. The Kurdish forces in question are backed by the United States in the war against ISIS. And in South Korea, the Trump administration's previous nominee for ambassador to South Korea, Victor Cha, a Bush administration veteran, has withdrawn, condemning the administration for being too hawkish. The administration is reportedly considering a quote-unquote bloody nose strike that would aim to take out North Korea's nuclear capability. Such a strike could potentially be misinterpreted by the North Korean government as the beginning of a full-scale invasion and provoke a full-scale retaliatory response. Such a strike could easily spiral into a full-scale Second Korean War, except this time involving nuclear weapons and a far stronger China and Russia. Worse yet, a National Security Council member reportedly said that such a strike would help out in the midterm elections. The Republicans are once again looking to start a war for their own political gain. In executive agency news, CDC Director and former Georgia Public Health Commissioner and woman smiling with the previous record holder for worst president in American history, Brenda Fitzgerald, resigned after revelations about her trading tobacco stocks while serving as CDC Director. The CDC, of course, has a prominent role in anti-smoking campaigns due to its public health responsibilities, and tobacco industry ties have long been considered toxic in the public health field. Fitzgerald was an ally of former HHS Secretary and con artist, showing you documents about that great investment opportunity he has, Tom Price, who was himself removed last year after revelations about him using government money for private jets and other personal expenses. Fitzgerald already had to recuse herself from opioid-related matters due to a separate conflict of interest, and was ousted by the newly confirmed HHS Secretary and man standing with the current title holder of worst U.S. president in history, Alex Azar, after the revelations about her buying new tobacco company stock while serving as CDC Director broke in Politico. CDC career employees rejoiced at Fitzgerald's ouster and the return of the previous acting director. However, the CDC is having major budget issues. Republican budget cuts will force the CDC to significantly pare back disease monitoring and prevention, both in America and abroad. These cuts are coming as this year's flu season is one of the worst on record. Just a reminder, a deadly pandemic doesn't really care whether you're Republican or Democrat, rich or poor. It's going to kill you regardless. This week also saw the revelations about Trump's Labor Department withholding information that would paint a recent regulatory decision in a negative light. The department withheld information showing that tipped workers would lose billions of dollars in pay due to a recent decision to force workers to pool tips and turn them over to employers. Such an arrangement is essentially an invitation for management to steal workers' tips, further worsening the already horrendous pay situation with regard to tipped workers. The Department of Housing and Urban Development also had a series of nepotism-related scandals this week, with revelations about HUD Secretary and man shocked to find out he was appointed to a cabinet position, Ben Carson, awarding a $485,000 no-bid contract to his son, despite warnings from ethics lawyers. Carson has also been relying on his family to help advise him and help him run the agency. Again, after being warned by ethics lawyers. Such an arrangement is pretty much par for the course for this administration. As recent examples, of course, Jared Kushner being Trump's son-in-law and seemingly having every job in the White House under the sun. And of course, Trump's own major corruption issues with regard to his businesses and foreign and domestic emoluments. The National Security Council recently proposed something that runs counter to traditional Republican anti-government orthodoxy: government ownership and control of 5G networks. The proposal was lambasted by both Republicans and Democrats and seems unlikely to come to fruition. Meanwhile, Immigration and Customs Enforcement is continuing to show its Gestapo-like tactics and lack of any basic level of humanity and empathy in their ongoing efforts to deport Miguel Perez Jr., an Army veteran and green card holder who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He is now attempting to be deported over a drug charge. Perez has since gone on a hunger strike, stating that he would rather die in America than be deported. These efforts come in addition to recent attempts to deport a Polish doctor, Lukasz Niek, who moved to America with his family as a child in 1979, over misdemeanor convictions that he obtained in high school in 1992. The Obama-era economic recovery is starting to sputter, thanks to America's first Oompa Loompa president. The past week ended with a massive dip in the stock market, and job creation is slowing down. Black unemployment actually increased in the most recent numbers. All of this comes as the Trump administration is trying to further deregulate Wall Street, with a recent example being Acting Consumer Financial Protection Bureau Director, Office of Management and Budget Director, and man who's headed up to here with the existence of the middle class, Mick Mulvaney, removing the CFPB's fair lending enforcement power. In better news, now former Federal Reserve Chair and woman who's wondering exactly what you plan on doing there, Janet Yellen, strongly punished Wells Fargo in relation to its massive fake account scandal. The Fed has forced the bank to oust several members of its board of directors, and it has imposed a cap on the bank's assets at $2 trillion until the Fed is satisfied that Wells Fargo has cleaned up its act. Trump gave his first State of the Union address this week, a speech altogether meaningless in the long run, as Trump neither overperformed nor managed to confess to treason during the middle of it. It was exactly what was expected, Trump half-heartedly reading a teleprompter to pitch a variety of mostly far-right policy ideas in a more normal-sounding package. And fact-checkers determined that Trump lied approximately once every 4.5 minutes. Trump naturally lied about having the highest ratings for the speech afterwards, and was fact-checked even by Fox News. Trump and the Republicans also got pissy about the Democrats not clapping enough, saying that they somehow hate America because of that. The Democratic responses to Trump were far more truthful, and in my opinion, interesting. The main official Democratic response was given by Conan O'Brien's baby brother, Joe Kennedy III, a third-term Massachusetts congressman and grandson of Bobby Kennedy. Kennedy's speech was good, although he did seem to have a bit too much chapstick. The Spanish-language rebuttal was given by Virginia delegate Elizabeth Guzman, and was noticeably more pointed in his condemnation of Trump and the Republican agenda. Vermont Senator, and man telling you to turn down that music, Bernie Sanders also gave a rebuttal, a much more policy-oriented speech than Kennedy's, which was more soaring rhetoric than specific proposals. Incidentally, Speaker of the House and man laughing at the thought of a sick child being denied health care, Paul Ryan, is in possible legal trouble relating to the speech. Ryan allowed the Trump campaign to use the official broadcast of the State of the Union for fundraising purposes, a violation of House rules. On Capitol Hill, Congress is dealing with its own set of issues. The Senate recently killed a proposed 20-week ban on abortion that was backed by Trump, with the House-passed bill being voted down 51 to 46, far short of the 60 votes needed to invoke cloture to avoid a filibuster. 3 Democratic senators, Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, and Joe Donnelly of Indiana, broke ranks to back the bill, while 2 Republican senators, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska broke ranks to vote against it. Democrats are also pushing to save the pensions of thousands of workers, though the efforts are currently bogged down by Republican opposition. Republicans are also refusing to fund community health centers created by the ACA. These centers serve 26.5 million people, many of whom live in areas with little or no medical care otherwise being available. Furthermore, government funding will likely run out in a matter of days, specifically on February 8th, likely forcing the passage of another short-term continuing resolution. This time, the House GOP could trigger a shutdown completely on their own, as Republican deficit hawks are balking at another CR and a failure to raise sequester spending caps for defense spending, while the far-right House Freedom Caucus wants to be even more hurtful and vindictive against immigrants. A fight over the debt ceiling is also going to come sooner rather than later, as the massive Republican tax cuts for the donor class have blown a massive hole in the deficit, to the point where Treasury Secretary and John Oliver's evil banker twin, Steve Mnuchin, is requesting an earlier debt ceiling increase than originally planned. Paul Ryan promoted the deficit-causing tax cuts over the weekend by pointing to the story of a secretary who was going to receive $1.50 a week from the legislation, something she was planning on using to pay for her Costco membership. For perspective, the Koch brothers will gain $1.4 billion from the tax cut, and will be spending $400 million in the 2018 midterms to keep their Republican cronies in control of Congress. The drug company Pfizer will be gaining $11 billion, but will be ending their investments in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's research. Walmart is gaining $2 billion, while closing over 60 stores and laying off thousands of employees. Bank of America is gaining $3 billion, while raising fees on low-income customers through extra fees on their checking accounts. So Paul Ryan really wants you to enjoy that extra $1.50 is the point. Congressional Republicans went on a retreat to West Virginia this week, and it has become increasingly clear that Republicans really don't have any coherent plans or agenda for the next year. Paul Ryan wants to further gut the social safety net and earned benefits, which is unlikely to come anywhere close to passage in the Senate, especially during an election year. House and Senate Republicans, meanwhile, are squabbling with each other over immigration as well, specifically over the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that was ended by Trump last year, with the Senate pushing for a less vindictive bipartisan compromise of some sort, while the House Republicans are pulling out all the stops to be as mean as humanly possible to immigrants. Republicans are also trying to figure out Trump's infrastructure proposal, with the Republican chair of the House Transportation Committee proposing a gas tax increase to pay for it that was immediately shot down by conservatives. Furthermore, House Republicans are pushing for their Senate colleagues to kill the legislative filibuster, an idea that Senate Majority Leader Ann Squirrel, hiding nuts in his neck pouch for the winter, Mitch McConnell has repeatedly shot down in the past year. These fights, combined with the previously mentioned ones about funding the government and the debt ceiling, are causing substantial infighting in the Republican Congress. All of this is further proof that this is a party fundamentally unfit to govern a small town, much less the most powerful nation on earth. Incidentally, an Amtrak train chartered by Republicans to carry their lawmakers to the retreat hit a garbage truck, killing one garbage worker and injuring several others, including several people on the train. There really is no better metaphor for the current Republican Party than a train full of idiots and corrupt pieces of crap crashing into a garbage truck and killing an average working person. On the electoral front, this week saw even more Republican House committee chairs announcing they will be retiring after 2018. New Jersey Republican and man who just remembered he left the stove on at home, Rodney Frelinghuysen, is the current chair of the highly powerful House Appropriations Committee, which oversees over $1 trillion in federal spending. And he will be retiring despite the fact that he is not yet term limited out of being the chair, like many other retiring committee chairs. Frelinghuysen himself has never won re-election with less than 58% of the vote, and Michael Moore once tried to have a ficus tree placed on the ballot against him to protest the lack of competitive congressional elections. However, Frelinghuysen's 11th district is shifting away from the GOP nationally, with Mitt Romney winning the district by 6 points in 2012, Trump winning the district by 1 point in 2016, and successful Democratic gubernatorial candidate Phil Murphy winning the district outright last year. Furthermore, 3 Democratic challengers outraised Frelinghuysen in the third quarter, an especially important factor, given the district's placement in the highly expensive New York City media market. Frelinghuysen's retirement definitively moves the 11th district into the toss-up category, as his chairmanship of the Appropriations Committee and long-term incumbency were massive favorables for Republicans in the district. South Carolina Republican and Patrick Bateman's accomplice, Trey Gowdy, is also retiring. Gowdy is the current chair of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, a position he took over after the previous chair, seductive beaver Jason Chaffetz, resigned from Congress last year to be on Fox News. Gowdy is most famous for leading the GOP Benghazi investigation, a ridiculous farce that cost the taxpayers over $7 million and lasted for more than 2 years. An investigation that served no real purpose other than to try to attack Hillary Clinton and blame her for the tragedy, a task at which they were altogether unsuccessful, especially given the previous Republican-led cuts to the State Department, which included crucial diplomatic security money. Gowdy was also a strong promoter of the bullshit Hillary email scandal. More recently, Gowdy has been helping lead GOP efforts to discredit the Russia investigation, though since his announcement of resignation, he has been far less critical of the Mueller probe. Gowdy's district is extraordinarily red, and it is unlikely that his retirement will help the partisan balance in the chamber. Gowdy and Frelinghuysen's retirement now mean that 8 Republican House committee chairs are opting to retire at the end of their current terms, and another one, Budget Committee Chair Diane Black, is stepping down to run for the Tennessee Senate seat vacated by the retiring Senator Bob Corker. These committee chair retirements come in addition to other Republican House members retiring or seeking higher office. Altogether, 41 House Republicans are not seeking re-election to the House, a very bad indicator for Republican hopes of retaining control of the chamber in the 2018 elections. Democrats are now preparing to target over 80 seats in the next midterm cycle, an unprecedented number of seats for any party to target. Republican efforts in the Senate are also not going terribly well, with several cases of top-tier Republican candidates opting not to run against Democratic incumbents, even in red states that Trump won by more than 10 points. Republicans in Arizona are getting increasingly jittery about Joe Arpaio's candidacy for the Senate seat being vacated by the retiring Jeff Flake. Arpaio is a former sheriff and convicted criminal responsible for egregious violations of both the U.S. Constitution and the basic human rights of thousands of Latinos while serving as Maricopa County Sheriff. Arpaio is viewed by Republican leaders in Arizona as another potential Roy Moore, losing an otherwise winnable seat to the Democrats. Another blow to Republican Senate hopes was dealt this week after the Department of Justice announced that it will not retry the corruption case of New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, after a federal judge threw out several of the charges against the incumbent senator. Menendez's seat was the main Republican hope of securing a long-shot upset in a solid blue state, and the decision by the DOJ will likely close the window on those hopes. Vice President, and man who finally realizes that he's going to hell for all of this, Mike Pence, is now preparing to lead GOP efforts in the midterms, already fundraising and campaigning for Republican candidates across the country. This is in marked contrast to Donald Trump's political profile heading into the midterms, with Republican congressional leaders fretting about sending Trump to all but the most blood-red districts because they fear that he'll do more harm than good. The Russia scandal is also exploding massively this week. The Trump administration has explicitly refused to implement the overwhelmingly bipartisan Russia sanctions passed last year by Congress. To make matters worse, the Trump administration chose to invite the heads of the three main Russian intelligence agencies to Washington this week to meet with CIA Director and Trump lackey Mike Pompeo. Republicans have stepped up on their significant campaign against special counsel and man worrying that Trump's going to have a heart attack before the trial, Robert Mueller. This week began with Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe stepping down under pressure from Republicans both in Congress and in the White House. Trump is now trying to push out Deputy Attorney General and Dobby the House Elf's brother, who went to law school, Rod Rosenstein, the person directly overseeing Mueller. This comes after Trump asked for Rosenstein's loyalty last November, which Rosenstein did not give. Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee also released a memo written by the Republican chair of the committee and man who just read the law on obstruction of justice, Devin Nunes, which aimed to try to discredit the Russia probe. The memo was supposedly about FBI abuses in obtaining a FISA warrant against Trump foreign policy aide and guy who's too oblivious to realize he's going to prison, Carter Page. They managed to ignore the fact that Page was already on the FBI's radar due to an attempted recruitment of him in 2013 by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, and that Page himself claimed to be an advisor to the Kremlin at the same time. The memo was released Friday, and proved to be even more of a dud than was expected, which I didn't even think was possible. The memo directly contradicted previous Republican claims, and revealed nothing even remotely resembling criminal actions. Nunes' stupid little memo was directly coordinated with the White House, and was a clear act of attempted obstruction of justice. Despite Republican efforts to obstruct, Mueller's investigation is uncovering more than ever before. Mueller will soon interview a former member of Trump's legal team, Mark Corallo, about the cover-up the Trump team attempted to conduct once word of the Trump Tower meeting with Russian agents broke in the press. Trump, at the time, dictated a statement to be released by his son and dumber and whiter version of Uday Hussein, Donald Trump Jr., that stated that the meeting was about adoptions, a lie which subsequent information directly contradicted. Corallo quit being the PR spokesperson for Trump's legal team around that time, and he is reportedly prepared to tell Mueller that current White House Communications Director and lead frontrunner in the Who is Donald Trump Having an Affair With sweepstakes, Hope Hicks, promised that emails relating to the meeting and cover-up would, quote, never come out. The implication being clear that she and the Trump team would either destroy or suppress the evidence. Hicks has already been interviewed by Mueller, and if she did not tell the full truth about her involvement in with these affairs during those meetings, she is likely on the hook for lying to a federal agent and more obstruction of justice charges. Former Trump campaign aide and guy trying to grow a beard to look tougher in prison, Rick Gates is also switching out his entire legal team and is likely preparing to secure a plea deal with Robert Mueller's team. Mueller has also requested a 90-day delay in the sentencing of former Trump National Security Advisor and assassin who seized his target, Michael Flynn, who cut a plea deal last year. Such a delay likely indicates that both Mueller and Flynn are working on something relating to the investigation and don't want it coming out publicly just yet. The Trump team's lawyers are also increasingly worried that Mueller will publicly try to indict Trump. Such an indictment would be unprecedented, but it would, and it is not entirely clear that it would stick, but it would rapidly indicate the gravity of the situation and force Congress to act. Well, that does it for this week's news. Thank you for watching the program. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting content.